The council officer looked at his clipboard and read out 11 complaints. 11. Filed against my business, over 8 months. Noise violations, parking disruptions, fire hazard concerns, unlicensed operation. He looked up at me and said, all of these were filed by the same individual. I already knew who it was. What he didn't know, and what she didn't know, was that I had been recording every single one of her visits for the past 6 months, and that the footage was already saved in 4 locations. My name is not important. What matters is that 3 years ago, I built something from nothing. A small alterations and tailoring business run from the ground floor of my home, in a quiet residential street, in the East Midlands. It wasn't glamorous. It was a sewing machine, a cutting table, a small waiting area with 2 chairs and 4 years of craft. I had spent my 20s learning. I had the correct permits. I had liability insurance. I had a home business license, approved by the local authority. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. My clients were mostly local. Word of mouth. Alterations for weddings, school uniforms, professional attire. By the end of my first year, I had a small waiting list. By the second year, that list was 3 weeks long. My neighbour, Patricia, had lived 3 doors down for 11 years. When I first moved in, she brought a plant, told me the street was quiet, and that she liked to keep it that way. I remember thinking, she seemed like a woman who had strong opinions about things that weren't hers. I should have trusted that instinct. The first time Patricia knocked on my door about the business I had been operating for 4 months. She said she was concerned about foot traffic, that clients coming and going was disturbing the character of the street. I explained the permit. I showed her the council approval. She smiled in the way people smile when they've already decided. They're not going to accept what you're saying, she said. I just think you should. Be mindful of the neighbours. I thanked her, closed the door, and made a note of the conversation. In my business log. That was the first receipt. I just didn't know yet how many more I'd be collecting. The complaints began 3 weeks after that conversation. The first was a noise complaint. A council officer visited, checked the premises, found nothing in violation, and closed the case. The second was a parking complaint. My clients parked on a public street, legally, within all guidelines. The complaint was dismissed. The third was a fire safety concern. An inspector visited, found my fire exits clear, my equipment properly maintained, my certificates up to date. Dismissed. Each time I cooperated fully. Each time the complaint was unfounded. Each time I updated my business log. What I didn't know then, but would discover later, was that Patricia was not just filing complaints. She was also speaking to my clients. 2 of them told me separately, months apart, that a woman on the street had approached them. As they were leaving my house, she told one client that my business was under investigation. She told another that I was operating illegally and that they should consider going elsewhere. Neither of those things were true. But by the time I found out, I had already lost 3 regular clients who had simply stopped booking without explanation. 3 clients, months of relationship building, gone. Because of words spoken, on a public pavement, by a woman with a grievance. I had never fully understood. That was the week I installed the cameras, 2 external, 1 covering the front path, 1 covering the pavement directly outside. I informed my remaining clients. I noted the installation date in my business log, and I waited. Patricia came to my door, twice more in the following month. Both visits were recorded. The first time, she told me she had spoken to a solicitor about business use in residential areas. She had not. I know this because I later requested her complaint file from the council under Freedom of Information. The second time, she asked me directly how long I intended to continue. I said, as long as my permits are valid. She said, we'll see about that. She turned and walked away. Camera 2 captured the full conversation. Crystal clear audio. time-stamped. 3 days later, complaint number 8 arrived. This one alleged that I was operating outside my permitted hours. I was not. But this complaint was different from the others, because this time, Patricia had submitted a statement. In it, she claimed to have witnessed clients arriving and leaving at 9:30 in the evening on multiple occasions. My permitted hours were 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. I checked my appointment book. I checked my security footage for every evening. She had specified not one client had visited outside permitted hours on any of the dates she cited. Not one. I printed the footage logs. I cross-referenced them with my appointment book. I had my camera provider certify the timestamps as unaltered. Then I compiled everything into a single document. 47 pages, 8 months of complaints, 8 months of dismissals, 8 months of logs, 6 months of camera footage, 2 recorded doorstep conversations, 3 client testimonies about the pavement conversations, and a certified statement from my camera provider confirming the authenticity of every piece of footage. I contacted a solicitor. She read through the file in 2 meetings. At the end of the second meeting, she put the folder down and said, "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of neighbour harassment I've seen in 15 years. I told her I was a tailor. Precision was the job. Here is what I want you to understand about the decision I made next. I did not want to destroy Patricia. I want to be honest about that. What I wanted was to continue my business in peace, to rebuild the client relationships she had damaged, to stop spending every other week responding to unfounded complaints filed by someone who had decided my livelihood was an inconvenience to her." Afternoon quiet. I had 3 options. Option 1, continue as I was. Respond to each complaint. Cooperate with each inspection. Hope she eventually stopped. The problem with option 1 was that she had not stopped in 8 months, and the complaints were escalating in specificity. She was learning what details to include to make each one harder to dismiss quickly. Option 2, approach Patricia directly. Sit down. Talk. Try to understand what she actually wanted. I had considered this, but the camera footage of her speaking to my clients on the pavement had removed that option. You cannot negotiate with someone who has already decided to operate dishonestly. Option 3, submit the full file to the council's Anti-Harassment Division, to my solicitor for a formal letter, and to the local licensing authority, with a request that they note the pattern of vexatious complaints against my file. I chose option 3, and I made one additional decision. I would give Patricia one opportunity to understand what was about to happen. My solicitor sent a letter, formal, measured, precise. It outlined the complaints, it outlined the dismissals, it outlined the doorstep conversations with timestamps, it outlined the client contact with witness statements, it outlined the false statement submitted with complaint 8 and the camera evidence that directly contradicted it. At the bottom, it stated, "Our client has submitted a full file to the council's Anti-Harassment Division and to the local licensing authority. She has also instructed us to advise you that any further contact, direct or indirect, with her clients, premises or business operations will result in immediate civil proceedings." Patricia received the letter on a Thursday morning. I know because Camera 1 captured her, collecting it from the postbox. She stood on the pavement and read it. She read it twice. Then she looked directly at the camera. She had not known. It was there until that moment. She went inside. She did not come out again that day. The council's Anti-Harassment Division reviewed the file over 3 weeks. At the end of that review, they sent me a formal letter confirming that the complaints filed against my business had been assessed as vexatious, meaning deliberately made, without reasonable basis, with the intention to cause disruption. They noted this on my file. They noted it on their records, and they informed me in writing that any future complaints from the same individual against my business would be reviewed in light of this finding, meaning they would begin from a position of significant skepticism. My solicitor submitted the council's letter to the local licensing authority. They responded by extending my home business license for an additional 3 years with a note of commendation for the thoroughness of my compliance records. Patricia made no further complaints. She has not knocked on my door since the letter was delivered. We pass each other on the street occasionally. She does not make eye contact. I always smile, not out of cruelty, but because I spent 8 months being precise, being documented, being patient, while she spent 8 months being careless with the truth. And carelessness, when faced with precision, never wins. The 3 clients I had lost came back within 6 weeks of the council's decision. Word had reached them, somehow, the way word always does, in small communities, that the concerns they had been told about were not just unfounded, they were fabricated. One of them sent me a message that I have kept. She said, "I should have trusted what I saw with my own eyes. I'm sorry I listened to someone else." I told her not to apologize, that people who operate the way Patricia operates rely on exactly that, on other people trusting a confident voice over their own experience. The trick, I told her, is to never let someone else's fiction become the story you believe. People ask me what Patricia actually wanted, and I've thought about this more than I expected to. My best understanding is this: she wanted control of something. She had decided was hers, the atmosphere of a street she had lived on for 11 years. She had a picture in her mind of what that street should look like, and my small business, my clients, my modest waiting area, my name on a small sign by the front door, didn't fit that picture. And rather than adjust the picture, she tried to remove what didn't fit. This is not unusual. There are people in every life, neighbours, colleagues, family members, who respond to something they cannot control by trying to make it disappear. They file complaints. They whisper to the right people. They chip away quietly, assuming that the person on the other side will eventually give up because the cost of resisting becomes too high. What they don't account for is the person who doesn't give up, the person who logs every conversation, who installs the cameras, who cross-references the dates, who sits with a solicitor and builds 47 pages of irrefutable evidence. Patricia thought she was dealing with someone who would eventually find it easier to close the door than to keep fighting. She had never met someone who found it easier to keep receipts. Here is what I want you to take from this. When someone targets what you have built, your livelihood, your reputation, your relationships, the worst thing you can do is react in the moment with emotion. The best thing you can do is document everything, say very little, and let the evidence do what anger never can. Evidence doesn't lose its temper. Evidence doesn't get dismissed. Evidence doesn't give them anything to use against you. It simply sits there, time-stamped and irrefutable, waiting for exactly the right moment. Patricia thought she was building a case against me. She was actually building my case for me. Every complaint she filed became another entry in my log. Every visit she made became another piece of footage. Every lie she told became another contradiction. I could document and disprove. She handed me 47 pages of evidence. I just put them in order. Before you go, I want your honest take on this. My solicitor gave me the option to pursue civil proceedings against Patricia for the clients I lost during those 8 months. I chose not to. Some people say that was too lenient. That lost income is lost income, and she should have faced financial consequences. Others say the council finding was enough, that the formal record of vexatious complaints is a consequence she'll carry indefinitely. Tell me in the comments, would you have taken it further? Or was the council finding consequence enough? And if someone has ever tried to quietly dismantle something you built, drop your story below. I read every single one. Subscribe to Bleeding Receipts. New story every week. Because betrayal always leaves proof, and so does every complaint filed against one.